So I want to touch on creative finance structures for buying online businesses. So this is a very critical topic right now because, in my opinion, as somebody who's been doing this for 15 years of buying online businesses, growing them and selling them, it's now a buyer's market. It used to be a seller's market, which means that a seller could ask for a valuation and get a full cash offer. And now that has shifted more to a buyer's market where a buyer can be more creative with how they pay out for the deal. So there's three ways that, and there's a lot of ways, right? But the three ways I have seen in the online business acquisition world to structure a deal. So one is earnouts and the other is seller financing. So earnouts, it's a structure where the business owner, the seller, obtains future compensation if the business achieves a certain goal. Now that's tied to some financial goal. For example, let's say the business used to do $5,000 a month. Um, and if an earnout structure could be, if it hits $3,500 a month, then the seller will get X dollars, right? Whatever that is. And then essentially you keep hitting these targets and the seller keeps getting their payouts. One that I love to do is earnout tied to a performance of the business. Both are tied to performance, but the one I'm about to talk about is tied to a percentage of revenue. So it's similar to the above, but you pay the seller a percentage of revenue each month. So it could be 75% of revenue each month. So if a business unfortunately dips after you acquire it, you pay out a certain percentage each month and you try to recover it. Both parties are very aligned in that sense. The next one is seller financing. It's less common. It's very common in real estate. So seller financing is where you get a promissory note, a mortgage note, where the seller gets paid back principal and interest on the business over a certain term. So terms could be 5 to 7 years, which is usually the case, and they get like 10% interest payments on top of that. So the challenge there is there's not really an alignment of incentives. It's sometimes very favorable to sellers for that because they're essentially getting guaranteed payments, but that doesn't mean the business is doing well because the seller financing note, the essentially the promissory note, is separate to the business. So you have to pay that no matter what. So I don't like to do that. I like to do earnouts, and I'm going to talk about two example deals that my team and I have done recently. So this one is a software as a service business. We've been negotiating in this through 2023 and just closed end of 2023. And so the structure is a minimum down payment plus earnouts plus guaranteed payments. Now, what does that mean? So let me break it down. The valuation was $40,000. Now, when you're doing earnouts and structures like this, they protect you as the buyer. So it has to be good for the seller as well. So the seller in an open market on a cash deal, valuation wise, probably could have gotten 30 to 35,000 for this. So we gave them a premium, right? And now the seller also has to understand that the buyer, me, I'm going to ask for something in return for the premium, so something to protect myself. So what we did, we put $1,000 down payment. That's very low. Usually on an earnout deal, it's 60 to 75% down payment. We put very little because seller was very happy that we're going to take this over and grow it. Now that's in a unique situation for me. That's not the case for everyone. For the first 2 months, I'm paying 75% of revenues for the first 2 months. Now, it's a software business, something we have not acquired in the past. It requires developers. It requires some experience in the back end systems, coding, right? So we were a little hesitant on that because we just don't have that experience. And so I said, okay, the first 2 months, let's do 75% of revenues. And so if the business is doing well, you're going to be involved, as in the seller will be involved to help me during those first 2 months transition, put a developer in place that we hire, and just be around, right? Because they're going to get paid 75% of the revenues. Then the remaining months, essentially, we pay fixed payments, $6,500 a month until the $40,000 valuation is hit. So let's say I buy it the first 2 months, it's not doing too well because let's say the software broke and we're just not able to fix it, seller ghosted us, or one of the biggest things with smaller SaaS companies is key man risk. Key man risk meaning the seller is very involved in the marketing, the development, and they walk away and the business just stops working because the identity of the software was tied to the seller. And so we didn't want that. That's why we did the 2 months seller financing, seller structure like that. And so let's say the first 2 months we buy it and it just doesn't generate enough revenue, right? It just dips. So that means that the first 2 months we pay out very little. Seller is incentivized to kind of help us because even though we're gonna pay we are always going to pay the $40,000, right? That's the structure we did. It's just we structured it in a way where it's broken out over multiple months. And so the first 2 months we pay out nothing because that's it, the business doesn't do well. So now they're going to get 6,500 over a longer period of time, right? Whereas if the business was doing well the first 2 months, maybe we double it, right? For whatever reason, they're going to get their money back, the 40,000, much quicker. So it's just about a timeline thing. If they get it back in 6 months versus let's say 14 months or 16 months, whatever the time period is, right? Um, the next one was an agency. We're still in the negotiations for this, but the structure is a little bit simpler. It's a down payment and an earnout tied to performance. So $10,000 down, valuation was $100,000, and we're going to pay 75% of monthly revenues until that valuation amount is achieved. Now, this one is a little different, no guaranteed payments, because this agency was on a downtrend. The seller just doesn't want to continue running it, so they know if you don't continue running an agency, which is a service-based business, it's just going to die. Clients won't be happy, they'll quit, and that's it, right? So they knew that this is not going to work for them long term, so they reached out to us, say, would you like to take this over? And they were open to a very creative structure that's very favorable to us as the buyer, where 75% of the revenue is paid out monthly. So essentially, we come in as an operator until we take it over. So we're going to operate the business, generate the revenue, pay them back 75% until the 100,000 valuation is achieved, and then they walk away. Right now, for whatever reason, if the downtrend continues with our operations, market is not doing well, they're going to get 75% of the revenues until they are essentially paid back. But that could take multiple years now rather than let's say 12 months, right? It could take 3 years if the business just keeps downtrending. And we'll continue operating it, but at some certain point we might go back and renegotiate and say, look, this business is dead. There's nothing here. We'll just let it sit, or maybe just take it over again, right? Worst case. So this is a very aligned structure where seller and buyer both understand that this business is going to die. It's in the best interest for me to take this over and try to revive it, essentially a turnaround deal. And hopefully the seller gets paid a fair price over a 12, 24 month period. So it's in the interest of both parties. So, in short, these are some creative finance structures. I love doing these structures because it protects my downside risk, right? Now, here are some caveats. Not every seller is going to be interested in this. We've gone through a 4 to 5 year period where everybody bought deals with cash, especially if you look at Empire Flippers, Quiet Light, FE International, Flippa. Every deal, majority of deals under $500,000 was mostly cash. So people are used to that. Sellers essentially are used to that. They haven't gotten to the point where they think, okay, maybe there isn't enough cash buyers out there for my deal. I need to work with a buyer to be more creative so that they're willing to still take over the business and I can walk away. So this is a very favorable structure for a buyer. So you have to make the structure very favorable for the seller. You either have to pay more. So if the open market valuation for a business is 100,000, you might need to pay 120,000, right? But you have to structure it where you're protected. I'm willing to pay a higher valuation. The valuation is just a number, right? I'm willing to pay a higher valuation if the business keeps performing, right? The risk is that business does not keep performing, and then I'm stuck with a $100,000 loss. So if the business keeps performing, I have no problem paying a few extra, $20,000 to the seller over a time period, right? No big deal. So essentially, you have to convey to the seller that you are the right buyer for the business and that they're going to get paid out whenever they do, right? And so that means you have to have expertise in the business, in this industry. You have to showcase your expertise, your team, and have confidence when you're going into the deal. So this is not for everybody. If this is your first time buying an online business and you've never done this before, sellers will be very skeptical whether you are the right person and they're willing to take a risk on you. So be aware that this is not for everybody, but if you can, whenever you're going into negotiation, ask if they're willing to do an earnout structure. Ask if they're willing to do this. You never know, right? You never know. So utilize these creative finance structures. Put them together. When you make an offer, you can do a cash offer, which is lower valuation. Let's say the open market valuation is 100,000. You could say, "Hey, I'm willing to pay you 75,000 cash, or I can pay you $110,000, but it's going to be a seller earnout structure like this." So be creative. You can do multiple offers. See what the seller is willing to work with you on. Some are willing to wait longer to get paid on. Some just want the cash. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if any questions.